Ubisoft has not been having a good time with everything that they've been releasing recently going straight into the dumpster, like Skull and Bones and Star Wars Outlaws, for example, and Assassin's Creed Shadows having to be delayed all the way to 2025 to hopefully salvage whatever disappointment they have waiting for us there. But XDefiant was supposed to be different though, because this was Ubisoft taking all the great things from their previous bangers like Splinter Cell, The Division, and Far Cry, and putting it all into a free-to-play, fast-paced sumo shooter that was getting hyped up to be the next Call of Duty killer. Now, every time a game ends up getting the nickname the something killer, that's never really a good sign in my opinion, because usually it just ends up backfiring on them. But the more you look at how XDefiant was handled during the 7 months it was running before they announced its closure, the more obvious you could see that their decline in player base was almost just bound to happen. So let's talk about everything that went wrong with XDefiant and how the game ended up falling off as hard as it did. Now, when XDefiant was first announced all the way back in 2021, let's just say that the people weren't too excited for it because, you know, despite the fact that the game was offering and promising realistic gunplay mixed with personalized classes, and the developers themselves were calling it, referring to it as a fast-paced firefight mixed with punk rock mosh pits. Okay. Yeah, so the dislikes on that reveal trailer were pretty telling about how people were feeling about having another live service multiplayer shooter on the market. But you know, the more that people actually got the chance to try the game in the playtests and the open betas, the more that sentiment slowly started to turn around, because when XDefiant actually did manage to release in May of 2024, it did hit the 1 million unique players mark just 2 hours after the servers went online, making it the fastest ever Ubisoft game to ever hit that milestone. And the reason for that is because the game was attracting not just a mix of the competitive players, you know, the tryhards and the sweats, but they're also trying to appease to the casual players as well, because this was the only hero shooter, I guess class-based shooter on the market that didn't use skill-based matchmaking. So everyone who was feeling burnt out from all these punishing COD lobbies and all the other games that have a very, you know, overtuned skill-based matchmaking, it's like they were getting a breath of fresh air playing XDefiant, because this was like a portal going back in time 10, 15 years ago, before all this, you know, hyper-optimized skill-based matchmaking nonsense started kicking in, and every single live service game just had to have it. And now whether that ended up paying off for XDefiant or not, we'll talk about in a moment, but if the live service market has taught us anything, it's that once you hit your peak player count during the first week of release, unless you're some weird anomaly like Deep Rock Galactic or Hunt Showdown, it's only gonna go downhill from there. And it's how you manage that decline in player base, and if you can form like a really tight-knit solid community, that sort of determines if your game's gonna survive over the long run or not. But unfortunately, this is Ubisoft we're talking about, and it's like they looked at every single possible way that they could fumble XDefiant and went straight ahead for those choices. Starting off with the most important thing that either makes or breaks a new shooter game that wants to enter into such a saturated market, which is the gunplay. You know, how it feels when you're running around shooting the enemy players, the overall satisfaction you get from playing the game, whether it be from the weapon picks, how they feel, the class systems, the abilities, how responsive the controls feel. And unfortunately, one of the most common complaints with XDefiant was that things just didn't work. Special abilities in the game sometimes just wouldn't go off. You would have to press a button multiple times just to get your character to register and do something as simple as throwing a grenade. And you know, a lot of people were having the issues where they would just lose access to an ability mid-game until they died and swapped it out for another one. So like the game was just genuinely broken. Like, I'm surprised they managed to ship this with how many things were busted with it. And let's not even get into things like weapon balancing and the classes, because that was another huge mess that, you know, I suppose it's sort of more expected since you're working with a brand new release of a game. But to say that XDefiant was a buggy mess on release would honestly be an understatement. Like, I mean, they don't call the company Ubisoft for no reason. They're known for being a company that has these broken releases that sometimes get fixed over the long run, other times they don't. But it's like all they care about is making sure that the microtransactions and the item shop are 100% operational day of release. Everything else can be worked on later. But something that really threw the players out for a loop with XDefiant's gameplay wasn't just the bugs, wasn't just like the game-breaking stuff. It was actually the lack of SBMM in their unranked mode that also played a part in there too, because what was supposed to be a breath of fresh air for the competitive players that were just tired of having to try hard and sweat in every single game actually ended up being one of the reasons why people abandoned XDefiant. Look, as much as we hate it when games like Call of Duty or Apex Legends overtune their skill-based matchmaking and just make it super punishing for you whenever you do win your matches, it's a game feature that's still kind of necessary in today's age, because what ended up happening with XDefiant is that all the new players, they were getting just absolutely steamrolled and they were quitting before they even got the chance to improve at the game. And then we had people who were veterans or just like very good at XDefiant saying that they were actually getting bored of getting 100+ kills each game, just spawn camping the noobs. You know, it was actually kind of funny because the typical XDefiant experience was like you had 2 to 3 people per match that were absolutely dominating the entire lobby, and then the rest of the people that were getting bodied, they would just go on Reddit and complain saying like, wait, hold on on, guys. XDefiant does have skill-based matchmaking because I'm not winning any of my matches. You know, there's something going on here. I'm getting punished. But the reality is that no, the game didn't have skill-based matchmaking and you probably were not as good as you thought you were. And this always leads back to the argument saying that, you know, back in the day, the old school shooter games, they didn't use skill-based matchmaking and they still succeeded. So why is the lack of skill-based matchmaking now such a huge problem? And the reason for that is because back in the day, you had like 2 to 3 options for online shooter games, and that's it. You know, people just had to play that because there was nothing else to do. Now you have thousands of different shooter games to play from, and if one of them isn't optimized to the max in this type of stuff, well, you're just gonna want to go play something else, you know? There's a reason why almost every single online shooter game right now has skill-based matchmaking in the first place. It's not like everyone just decided to implement it and see like, oh, let's just go see if it works, you know? No, there's actual data analysts that actually sat down with this and decided, hey, this is the best way to retain the players, make sure the new players don't get absolutely crushed and they can get addicted to the game and spend money, and that way we keep the game exciting for them, even if it means punishing the experienced players in the process. So when XDefiant decided to take away SBMM in 2024, that's when the people realized how much they really do need it in order to have fun in today's market. But another issue that XDefiant had to deal with wasn't just the fact that it was riddled with game-breaking bugs or the lack of modern features in a competitive game. They also had to deal with living up to the label that people put on XDefiant since the beginning, which was being the next Call of Duty killer. And if you want your brand new title to go toe-to-toe with games like Call of Duty, Apex Legends, or Valorant, which are all very well-established games at this point, you need to have some sort of mind-blowing ace up your sleeve in order to be able to stand a chance in the first place. Well, actually, succeeding in the live service market these days is actually super easy, because there's only one thing you need to do. There's nothing else. People like to overcomplicate it, but all you have to do is do with this one thing. You need to make people feel like it's 2016 Overwatch all over again. Do you remember when 2016 Overwatch dropped that people that weren't even into shooter games felt like, oh god, I have to try this game, I have to play it? That's all you have to do, right? It's so complicated and, you know, it involves a lot of work to get that, but at the end of the day, you just have to make people feel like your game isn't like all the rest. You know, you have to make it feel like it's something fresh and new that people just have to play. And well, XDefiant in this case just really failed to deliver anything memorable for the players. Like, sure, you know, you had the faction system, which you can pick classes from different Ubisoft games, like Splinter Cell, The Division, and you know, that was a pretty cool thing to see during the first week of release, but like everything else, the maps are pretty stale, and like I mentioned, the gunplay itself, which was the most important aspect, that was okay at best when the game wasn't breaking on you. So XDefiant was just too unpolished and forgettable for a game that people were expecting to dethrone Call of Duty with, so when the game actually did manage to release for people to be able to check out and play, sure, you know, Ubisoft did manage to get those 1 million unique players within 2 hours of the game's release, but you know, I wish there was also a way to see how many of those players actually stuck around for more than 2 to 3 matches, because I'm pretty sure what happened is that they got into the game, they played it, they saw how broken and buggy the game was, they saw a half-baked Ubisoft shooter game, and then they just went back to playing their more established titles. And competing in the live service market these days is just getting harder and harder because the games that have been running for years at this point are becoming more complete, more polished. They're not just one game mode anymore, they have a whole arsenal of different things to do. So for Ubisoft to come out with a buggy mess of a class-based shooter game like XDefiant, unfortunately, they just really never stood a chance. And if you've been following Ubisoft and their track record over the recent years, then you know that they already have a reputation with the community. You know, they either mismanage their games or they release games that are far from being finished. So all of this that was happening with XDefiant was really nothing new for them. Ubisoft just has that tendency of overpromising and overhyping a product and just dumping millions of dollars into development, calling it the next best thing that's going to change and revolutionize the market, and then they just really don't follow through with it. You know, we always end up getting a game that feels like it could have been something great, it could have made a real impact on the market if they actually took the time to polish it and make it run properly and not give players such a terrible first impression of the game. But with how many corners it feels like they cut and how they're always rushing because of investor deadlines to release the game, well, XDefiant really just felt half-assed in the hands of the players, and once things really didn't go according to plan, Ubisoft themselves were the first ones to jump ship and stop working on fixing all the things that were wrong with XDefiant. And well, now we get to this point where we are today, where XDefiant is scheduled to be shut down on June 3rd of 2025. Anybody who's played the game before the announcement that they did on December is still able to play the game, but you know, what I found really interesting though, even though they're going to follow through and release all the content for Season 3 before the game actually shuts down, they're not really allowing any new players into the game, you know, so if you made an account and played XDefiant before they announced the shutdown, then perfect, you know, you can still get in and enjoy it before before it's gone forever. You can probably find a match here and there to play, but if you were thinking about getting into the game because you just heard the news, like, oh crap, you know, XDefiant is shutting down, I never got the chance to play it, let me see if I can get into it, well, you can't. Which is honestly the first time I've ever seen the death of a game be handled like this. You know, it's kind of weird that they just want some sort of private funeral for XDefiant, but maybe they just don't want to deal with, you know, additional server issues or something like that. I don't know, guys. But yeah, that's all I really want to talk about with you guys today, so thank you guys for watching.